Imagine you board a flight just like any other. Valid ticket. Correct seat number. Not disturbing anyone. But just because you don't look like the one who belongs there, you're asked to leave. Detained. Handcuffed. Until blood spills onto the airplane floor. It's not because you broke the law. It's because someone decided to see you as a threat. If it were you, what would you do? Argue back and make things worse? Or stay silent and hope it will blow over? And what if the person being treated like that was your daughter? This isn't a story about a flight. This is a story about the boundary between power and dignity. About the moment a person is forced to choose to bow their head or to stand firm, even trembling. Stay with us, because this story may not just be Ariana Cole's. It could be anyone's story, anyone who has ever been seen through and not treated as human. If you believe stories like these need to be told, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to get started with us. The plane is still parked at Gate C-17, JFK International Airport, New York. The engine hasn't started. The cabin lights are still on. Everything should be perfectly normal. But in the first row of first-class seat 1A, a black girl of about 17 was handcuffed to the armrest. Not metal handcuffs. Instead, white plastic handcuffs, the kind commonly used in quick detention situations. It's tightened too much. It was so tight that her wrist began to change color from pink to dark purple. So tight that blood seeped out, trickling down the cream-colored leather of the chair. No one shouted. No one stood up. A flight attendant standing nearby glanced over, then turned away, speaking softly but coldly. "Don't overreact. I brought this upon myself." The girl didn't answer. It wasn't because she didn't want to. It was because she was trying to breathe steadily so she wouldn't faint. Her name is Ariana Cole. And until that moment, Ariana still believed that if she did everything right, if she stayed calm, if she didn't cause trouble, then the world would treat her fairly. She was mistaken. Ariana didn't cry. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she had learned very early on that tears are useless in rooms of power. She sat as straight as she could, even though the handcuffs pulled her shoulders back. The seat was cold. The air in the compartment was dry and heavy. The smell of hot coffee, the smell of expensive perfume, the smell of people accustomed to being served. No one looked directly at her. A middle-aged man in seat 1F coughed softly and turned a page in his newspaper. A woman wearing a gold watch glanced over, then turned away as if she hadn't seen anything. Silence. A silence that makes one feel non-existent. Ariana inhaled, exhaled, counting her heartbeat in her head. She told herself, "Stay calm. Don't make things worse." Just 30 minutes earlier, things had been very different. Ariana boarded the plane with an old backpack slung over her shoulder. She wore an oversized gray hoodie. Her headphones were around her neck, but no music was playing. She had just completed a 6-week summer STEM program in Boston. On the last day, she stayed up until nearly 3 in the morning to submit her final assignment. Her brain was tired. Her body was tired. She just wanted to sit down, get some sleep, go home. The first-class ticket seat 1A was purchased 3 weeks ago. Full payment made. No upgrade. No reward points used. She knew that because her father had always told her so carefully, "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone," he once said. "Just know you didn't do anything wrong." Ariana nodded at that moment. She didn't fully understand what he meant. Until today, as Ariana placed her backpack in the overhead compartment above seat 1A, she felt a gaze from behind her. It wasn't a curious look. It was a judgmental look. The chief flight attendant, Margaret Hill, stood in the aisle, holding a checklist. She had been flying for over 20 years. She was familiar with first class, familiar with the standard faces. She looked Ariana up and down, the hoodie, the old sneakers, the simple ponytail. Margaret smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Could you please double-check my ticket?" she said, her voice gentle. Ariana nodded and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. Seat 1A, name Ariana Cole. Status PAID in full. Margaret glanced over it. Then she said, "There may have been a mistake." The word mistake is uttered so easily as if it carries no consequences. Before Ariana could answer, her phone was snatched away. "Let me check further." And from that moment, things started to spiral out of control. Now, Ariana sits there, handcuffed, bleeding, being treated as a threat. She looked down at her wrist, dark red blood against her brown skin. A thought flashed through my mind. If I fainted, would anyone care? She shook her head slightly. She wouldn't allow herself to sink. Ariana didn't know that somewhere in this airport, a man had just read a message that was just 4 words long. Dad, I'm scared. And everything is about to change. Ariana Cole is used to not seeking attention. It wasn't because she was shy. Rather, she understood very early on that, in many rooms, simply her presence was enough to make others uncomfortable. She learned to speak just enough, to smile moderately, not to ask too many questions, not to be the center of attention. Her father used to call it a survival skill, but Ariana didn't like the name. It made everything sound like a constant battle, and all she wanted was to live a normal life. When she was little, Ariana once asked her father a very simple question. Dad, why do I have to try twice as hard as the other kids? Marcus Cole didn't answer immediately. He was standing in the kitchen pouring coffee, still wearing his perfectly ironed white shirt. A tall, dark-skinned man with a calm demeanor. His gaze was always pensive, as if he were constantly contemplating something far away. Finally, he said, it's not because you're inferior to them. It's because this world won't give you a chance to make mistakes. Ariana was only 10 years old at the time. She didn't understand everything. But she remembered. She always remembers. On this morning's flight, Ariana did everything right. She arrived early. She lined up in the correct group. She said thank you to the ground staff. She didn't push or shove. She didn't play loud music. She chose her usual gray hoodie with no large print or slogan, just a comfortable item. She didn't realize that her very comfort was making others uncomfortable. When Margaret Hill first approached seat 1A, Ariana recognized that gaze. It wasn't a curious gaze. Rather, it was the gaze of someone questioning her presence. Margaret didn't speak immediately. She stood there for a few seconds, long enough for Ariana to sense the change in atmosphere. Could you show me the ticket? Margaret asked. Her voice was polite, but not warm. Ariana opened her phone. She held it up to the screen. She was used to having to prove herself. Margaret glanced over, didn't read carefully, just looked at the name, then looked at Ariana. Are you sure you're sitting in the right seat? The question sounded harmless, but Ariana perceived something different. She replied very calmly, yes, seat 1A. This is my ticket. Margaret smiled, a professional smile. Let me check the system again. And then she took Ariana's phone. No permission asked, no explanation given. Just hold it. At that moment, Ariana felt her heart beating faster. Not because of fear, but because of a feeling of familiarity. The feeling when someone decides that her words aren't trustworthy enough. She had seen this before at school, at the store, at the parent-teacher meetings her father attended with her. It's always the same look. It's always the same quiet suspicion. Ariana took a deep breath. Could you please give my phone back, she said, her voice still even. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She looked at the screen, pressed a few buttons, then frowned. That's strange, she said. The system sometimes malfunctions. Error. A very convenient word. Margaret looked up, scrutinizing Ariana more closely, as if comparing an image in her mind to the person sitting before her. Do you have any identification? Ariana nodded. Your passport is in the backpack on top. Take it down. Ariana stood up, raising her hand. A slow movement. She didn't want anyone to misunderstand. At that moment, Margaret said, her voice rising, wait. Don't touch anything without permission. Ariana paused. She turned around. She just told me to get my passport. Margaret didn't answer that question. She just said, sit down. There was a brief silence. It was very brief. But it was enough for Ariana to realize that she had stepped into a different realm. No more ticket checks. No more formalities. This is when power begins to manifest itself. Ariana sat down. No resistance. No argument. She told herself, let them check. Everything will be fine. She still believed that. At least at the time. Margaret pressed the call button in the cabin. Just seconds later, a man emerged from the middle compartment. Dark suit. Solid build. A quick gait. What's the matter? He asked. Margaret didn't turn to Ariana. She said directly, this passenger is in the wrong seat, and they are uncooperative. Ariana looked up. I have a valid ticket, she said. Her voice wasn't shaky, but she sounded a little tired. The man looked at her. Then he looked at Margaret. Have you confirmed this in the system? Margaret replied immediately. The display system is unclear. It's unclear. Ariana realized one thing. Truth is no longer the most important thing. It's important who's speaking. The man turned to Ariana. Could you please leave your seat while we conduct further checks? Ariana looked around. Eyes darted across and then averted. No one spoke. She thought of her father, of his words of advice. You don't need to apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. She swallowed. I didn't leave my seat, Ariana said. I followed all the proper procedures. There was no anger. It was just a normal statement. But the room froze. The man exhaled. He pulled out his walkie-talkie. We need assistance in the front compartment. Ariana felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't panic, but a part of her whispered, this is going too far. A few minutes later, Daniel Brooks' air marshal appeared. He wasn't in a hurry. He didn't raise his voice. But from the moment she stood there, Ariana felt herself shrinking. Daniel looked at Margaret. He listened to her summary. Don't ask Ariana any questions. He turned to her, his voice low. You did not follow the flight attendant's instructions. That is a violation of the rules. Ariana opened her mouth. I just wanted them to check that it was my ticket. Daniel nodded. A nod that didn't convey agreement. She needs to cooperate. Those two words. Ariana had heard them her whole life. She looked down at her hands. She wondered, if I stand up now, will everything stop, or will it simply confirm what they already suspected? She sat still, and that very silence became the excuse. Daniel gestured. Margaret stepped back. Okay, Daniel said. We'll handle it differently. Ariana didn't have time to understand what another way meant before he took a step forward, and he placed his hand on her wrist. At that moment, a single thought flashed through Ariana's mind. Dad, I'm not okay. No one in first class on that flight noticed the moment everything turned around. There were no shouts, no scenes of chaos, just a very subtle change in atmosphere. Like when a storm begins to form far offshore. There aren't big waves yet, but the wind has already changed direction. Ariana Cole sensed it the moment Daniel Brooks placed his hand on her wrist. Not tightening. Not yet. It's just a touch. But it was enough to send a clear message. Things are no longer under her control. Ariana looked up at Daniel. He was almost 2 heads taller than her. He had a sturdy build. His face was expressionless. No anger. No hostility. It was just one man who made the decision. Get up, Daniel said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to silence the front compartment. Ariana took a breath. She looked around once more. No one looked back at her. Those who paid $10,000, $15,000 for those first-class tickets are avoiding eye contact with a 17-year-old girl. It's not that they don't see it. It's that they don't want to see it. Ariana slowly stood up. She did everything as slowly as possible. She didn't want anyone to think she was rebelling. I just want them to check my ticket properly, she said. Her voice was low but clear. Daniel didn't answer that question. She didn't follow the flight attendant's instructions, he said. This is a security issue. The word security fell upon the first-class cabin like an iron door slamming shut. Margaret Hill stood behind Daniel, her arms crossed over her chest. She said nothing, but her eyes showed relief. It was as if everything had finally gone according to her wishes. Ariana realized that, and a strange sadness welled up in her chest. It's not fear, it's disappointment. She had hoped that someone would say, wait a minute, check again. But no. Can I call my dad? Ariana asked. It wasn't a request. It was just a question. Daniel looked at her. Then he looked at Margaret. That's not necessary, he said. We're handling it. Ariana bit her lip. She recalled an old conversation. You must know when to speak and when to be silent, Marcus once said. But you must also know when not to be silent. Ariana has been silent enough in her life. I didn't do anything wrong, she said. This time, her voice was more confident. And at that moment Daniel exhaled, a very faint sigh. But it carried a hint of impatience. Okay, he said. We're done with this. Daniel took Ariana's arm. It wasn't a strong pull, but enough to make her lose her balance. Ariana was startled. Please don't touch me, she said. A few hushed whispers could be heard in the first-class cabin. Then silence returned. Margaret took a step forward. She wasn't cooperating, she said. We tried to resolve it amicably. Ariana turned to look at her. She never returned my phone, Ariana said. She never read my ticket. Margaret didn't look at Ariana. She looked at Daniel. It's as if Ariana is no longer someone who needs a conversation. Daniel gestured with his hand. Go back to your seat, he said. Ariana didn't understand. She stood up as requested. Go back to your seat, he repeated. She complied. As soon as she sat down, Ariana felt both her arms being pulled behind her back. Wait, she said, but it was too late. Daniel pulled out a white plastic handcuff. A quick, decisive movement. Click. The sound wasn't loud, but Ariana will remember it for a long time. What are you doing? Ariana exclaimed. Keep her here, Daniel replied, for the safety of the flight. She felt the plastic cord tighten around her wrist. He's hurting me, she said. Daniel didn't stop. Click. The handcuffs were pulled tighter. Ariana held her breath. A burning sensation spread. Stop, she said. Her voice began to tremble. I'm not resisting. Margaret turned away. Don't overreact, she said. It's just a formality. When Daniel forced Ariana to sit down completely, she felt her back hit the armrest hard. A sharp pain shot up my spine. Her hands were locked behind her back in the seat. The space was cramped. She couldn't adjust her posture. She tried moving her wrist. A sharp, piercing pain shot straight to my brain. He squeezed too tightly, Ariana said. I can't feel my hand anymore. Daniel bent down. You should have thought about that before causing trouble, he said. Ariana opened her mouth, then closed it again. She realized that any explanation at this point would be meaningless. She looked down. A drop of dark red blood fell onto the cream-colored leather seat, then the second drop. Then, Tuesday. Sarah, the young flight attendant standing nearby, turned pale. She's bleeding, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Margaret glanced over. It's just a scratch, she replied. Don't make a big deal out of it. Sarah stood still. She wanted to say something, but she didn't. Ariana saw that hesitation, and her heart sank. The time started to drag on in a strange way. Each second seems to pass more slowly than usual. Ariana felt her hands getting colder from her wrists down to her fingertips. She tried to curl her finger. It didn't work. She tried to move her shoulder. It hurt terribly. Sweat was pouring down the back of my neck. Give me some water, Ariana whispered. She wasn't sure if anyone heard her. Margaret didn't come back. Water is for passengers only, she said. Her voice was even. Ariana chuckled softly. A silent laugh. Am I no longer a passenger, she thought. She bowed her head. Her hair covered her face. It wasn't because she was ashamed. It was because she didn't want anyone to see the fear in her eyes. She closed her eyes. A familiar image flashed through her mind. The kitchen in the morning. The smell of coffee. Marcus Cole standing by the window. Are you all right? He would often ask. Ariana always replied, I'm fine. This time, she's not okay. She opened her eyes. She looked over at the small table next to the chair. Her phone was lying there. The screen was dark. Ariana couldn't remember when Margaret had put it down there. She stared at it. An idea flashed through my mind. It's very risky, but it's also very necessary. She leaned forward. Carefully, clenched her teeth. Every movement was accompanied by a sharp pain. She lowered her head, close enough for her face to be reflected on the black screen. She whispered, Hey Siri. The screen lit up. Text Dad, Ariana whispered softly. Her voice almost faded into the sound of the auxiliary engine. Dad, I'm scared. She paused. She inhaled. Plane. JFK. I'm hurt. A tear fell onto the screen. Send. Ariana tilted her head back. She didn't know if the message was sent. She didn't know if her father saw it. But at least, she didn't stay silent. Outside the window, the New York sky was gray. Drops of rain began to fall on the plane. The first-class cabin remained silent. Little did anyone know that, somewhere in this airport, a man had just read that message. And this plane will not take off as planned. The first-class cabin of the Atlantic Crown Airlines flight became unusually quiet. It wasn't the pleasant tranquility before takeoff. It was a heavy, oppressive silence weighing down on my chest. Ariana Cole sat motionless in seat 1A. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. Her wrists ached as if they were on fire. She didn't cry out loud. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. It wasn't because she wasn't in pain. It was because she understood that any sound at this moment would only annoy people, not awaken them. A man in seat 1F adjusted his tie. He glanced at Ariana for a very brief moment. Then he turned away. An elderly woman in seat 2 let out a soft sigh as if witnessing a flight delay. Not a person who was being hurt. Sarah, the young flight attendant, stood close to the aisle. Her hands were clasped tightly together. She looked at Ariana, then at Margaret Hill, then back at Ariana. There was something very clear in Sarah's eyes. Fear and guilt. But she didn't step forward. Daniel Brooks leaned against the front partition of the compartment, his arms crossed. He didn't look at Ariana, as if the matter was settled. Margaret Hill checked the service list. The paper rustled softly in her hand. Everything seems to be continuing as usual, as normal. Only Ariana is an exception. Time passes slowly. Ariana didn't know how much time had passed since she was handcuffed. 10 minutes, or 20. She only knew that the sensation in her hand was changing. It started with pain. Then came a burning sensation. And now, it's numbness. A terrible numbness. As if her hand no longer belonged to her. She tried to curl her fingers. No response. A simmering sense of panic is brewing. Stay calm, Ariana told herself. Don't let them see. I'm scared. She took a deep breath, but each time she inhaled, her chest tightened. Is she all right? A man's voice called from behind. Daniel turned around. It was the man in seat 1F. Can we take off now? He asked again. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock. Daniel nodded. We are processing it. The man shrugged, as if that were enough. Ariana overheard that conversation. Every word was like a thin knife, not because of rudeness, but because of indifference. She realized one thing very clearly in this compartment: their inconvenience was more important than her pain. Sarah took a deep breath. Finally, she took a step forward. Miss Hill, Sarah said softly, perhaps we should loosen the handcuffs. She's injured. Margaret looked up. Her eyes were cold and sharp. Sarah, she said, you're here to work, not to judge. Sarah blushed. But that's enough, Margaret interrupted. Go back to your seat. Sarah stood still for another second. Then she stepped back. Ariana saw that moment. The moment when someone chooses to prioritize their own safety over standing up for what is right. She didn't blame Sarah. She understood. Not everyone is able to pay the price. Cold sweat ran down Ariana's spine. She lowered her head further, trying to find a less painful position, but the handcuffs wouldn't allow it. A slight dizziness came over her. Her vision blurred for a moment. Don't faint, she told herself. Don't faint here. She needs to stay calm. She needs to stay in control. She thought of her father, Marcus Cole. She didn't know where he was right now. He might be in a meeting. He might be on his way to the airport. She didn't know if he had read the message yet. That thought was both comforting and terrifying. Margaret Hill walked past seat 1A. She paused. She looked down at Ariana's wrist. The blood stain had spread further. It soaked into the fabric of the shirt. Margaret frowned. You've soiled the chair, she said. Her voice was devoid of emotion. She pulled a tissue from her bag and tossed it onto Ariana's lap. Wipe it off. Ariana looked up. She looked at Margaret. She wanted to say so many things, but she said nothing. She bent down, trying to use a tissue to blot the blood. That movement tightened the handcuffs even more. She gritted her teeth. Another drop of blood fell to the floor. Outside the window, the rain intensified. Streaks of water stretched across the aircraft's fuselage. The speakers blared in the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, our flight will be delayed for a few minutes. A sigh echoed throughout the cabin. No one knows the real reason. Daniel looked at his watch. He frowned. What's the matter? He asked, over the radio. The reply from the other end was very brief. Stay where you are. Daniel's frown deepened. Ariana heard that. Stay where you are. She didn't know what it meant, but her heart was beating faster. Something isn't right. Margaret Hill strode quickly toward the cockpit. Her shoes tapped softly on the floor. Sarah watched. Then, she turned back to look at Ariana. Her eyes looked different now than before. It's not just fear. It's anxiety. Actually, are you all right? Sarah whispered as she walked past. Her voice was so soft, almost inaudible. Ariana nodded slightly. A very small nod. "Thank you," Ariana whispered back. Just 2 words. But for the first time in this compartment, she was treated like a human being. Sarah pursed her lips. Then she walked away. Ariana closed her eyes. She didn't know what was about to happen, but she sensed a change in the atmosphere. Not from the people around us, but from this very space. It was as if the first-class cabin was holding its breath. She remembered what her father had said a long time ago. "You don't need to be strong all the time. Just don't give up." Ariana didn't give up. She remained seated, still breathing, still waiting. Outside, the rain is falling incessantly. And somewhere in JFK Airport, a man was walking briskly with a cold determination in his eyes. The first-class cabin remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of indifference. It was the silence of waiting. Ariana Cole felt it in every breath she took. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this wasn't over yet. Daniel Brooks stood near the aisle, a radio in hand. He frowned, looking toward the cockpit. "How long will the delay be?" he asked. The voice from the other end replied briefly, "It's unclear. There's a request from the ground." Daniel clenched his jaw. He wasn't used to being detained without explanation, especially when he was handling a security situation. Margaret Hill turned back from the cockpit, her face tense. "They said they couldn't push back yet," she said. "There are problems on the runway." Daniel frowned. "A runway," he repeated. "They said there wasn't one earlier." Margaret remained silent. 1 second. 2 seconds. "It must have been a last-minute change," she said, but her voice was uncertain. Ariana overheard the conversation. She didn't understand the details, but her instincts told her that something was happening outside this compartment. The numbness in Ariana's hand gradually spread up her forearm. She tried to move her wrist again. It was useless. A silent fear welled up inside me. It's not the fear of being treated unfairly. It's the fear of actually harming one's own body. "Dad," Ariana said, her voice weaker than before. "I can't feel my hands anymore." Daniel glanced down. His gaze lingered on her wrist for a longer time. "The leather has changed color, dark purple. Small cuts are clearly visible beneath the plastic fibers." He hesitated, just for a moment. Then he turned away. "She'll be fine," Daniel said. "We've handled many cases like this before." Ariana closed her eyes. She no longer believes in the phrase, "it will be all right." A man in seat 2C stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice sounding polite. "Are we running late because of this?" Daniel turned around. "For security reasons," he replied. The man nodded, as if that were enough. "Understood," he said. Then he sat down. Ariana heard it. She realized one thing very clearly: as long as you label something as security, everything is accepted. Sarah stood at the back of the compartment, her back against the wall. She stared at Ariana without blinking. A fierce internal struggle was raging in Sarah's mind. She remembered her first training session. Always follow the chief flight attendant. Don't interfere with security matters. Keep yourself safe. But then she saw the blood. She saw the hand turning purple, and another voice echoed in her head. "What if it were my sister?" Sarah took a step forward, then stopped. She swallowed hard. Margaret Hill Quay sang Daniel. "Perhaps we should move her to the back," she said, "to avoid disturbing the other passengers." The way she uses words is very smooth. It's not about helping her. It's about avoiding disturbing her. Daniel nodded. "Prepare to bring her down," he said. Ariana opened her eyes. "Get down?" she asked. "I didn't do anything wrong." Daniel bent down, his voice low. "She is uncooperative. We will hand her over to ground security." Ariana felt her heart pounding. "If you're going to take me down," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you have to take off my handcuffs." Daniel didn't answer. He gestured for another employee to come closer. At that moment, Ariana felt genuinely panicked. It is no longer injustice. It is no longer humiliation. It's an instinctive fear. She imagined being dragged off the plane, being stared at, being led away like a criminal. She thought of her father. Did he read the message? Does he believe that his daughter needs him? Ariana took a deep breath. "Please," she said. Her voice cracked. "It's not begging. It's pleading for help." Just then, a sound blared from the internal loudspeaker. "Attention crew. Do not proceed." The entire compartment fell silent. Daniel spun around towards the cockpit. "Repeat," he said into the radio. The reply was clearer. "Don't continue." Stay where you are. This is an instruction from ground management. Margaret Hill turned pale. What? She whispered. Daniel stood motionless. For the first time since entering this compartment, he didn't know what to do next. Ariana opened her eyes. She didn't understand everything, but she knew she hadn't been taken away yet. Not yet. A small murmur spread throughout the compartment. What's going on? How much longer do we have to wait? Why did they stop? No one answered. Sarah looked at Ariana. Her eyes were filled with surprise. Margaret took a deep breath. She adjusted her dress. Perhaps it's just a misunderstanding, she said, her voice strained. We'll sort it out soon. Daniel said nothing. He looked at his watch. Then he looked back at Ariana's wrist. A flicker of suspicion crossed his eyes. Outside, the rain has stopped. On the runway, a convoy of security vehicles was moving faster than usual. Red and green lights reflected off the aircraft. Those images were seen through the window of Seat 1A. Ariana saw it. She didn't know what it was, but her heart was pounding. Not because of fear, but because of hope. Margaret Hill turned back towards the front of the compartment. Daniel, she whispered, are you sure this needs to go this far? Daniel looked at her. You're the one who said she was the problem, he replied. Now, you're worried. Margaret remained silent. For the first time, she felt something slipping from her grasp. Ariana closed her eyes. She didn't know what was coming, but she felt it clearly. This silence no longer stands on the side of those who hurt her. It's waiting for something, a moment. One person, one truth, can no longer be ignored. Outside the cabin, a man just walked quickly through the security gate. He didn't run, he didn't shout, but each step was firm. His gaze was cold and focused. His name is Marcus Cole, and he had just finished reading a message that no father would ever want to receive in his life. No one said it out loud, but everyone sensed that patience in first class was wearing thin. It doesn't belong to the passengers. It belongs to those in power. Daniel Brooks glanced at his watch again. The minute hand moved slowly, as if deliberately teasing him. He was accustomed to having all his orders executed immediately. He was accustomed to clarity, risk, or no risk cooperation or resistance. This situation doesn't fall into any of the boxes. Ariana Cole sat silently in seat 1A. Cold sweat ran down her spine. Her hands were numb. The sharp pain had turned into a dull tingling sensation, as if hundreds of tiny needles were pricking her skin. She was no longer sure she could move her fingers. But what frightened her most was the change in Daniel's eyes. It's no longer the toughness of an enforcement officer. Instead, it's the frustration of someone who feels their authority is being challenged. We can't wait forever, Daniel said. His voice was low but sharp. Margaret Hill stood beside him. She nodded more quickly than usual. The passengers are losing patience, she said, and this doesn't need to drag on. Daniel turned to look at Ariana. Get up, he said. Ariana opened her eyes. I can't stand, she replied. Her voice was hoarse. Get up, Daniel repeated. This time his voice was impatient. Ariana shook her head very slightly. I can't feel my hands anymore, she said. Please, take the handcuffs off. Daniel bent down. They were so close that Ariana could smell the faint scent of cologne on his shirt. She chose this path herself, he said. Now cooperate. At that moment, Margaret Hill turned away. She didn't want to see it, not out of pity, but because she didn't want to take responsibility for what was about to happen. Sarah stood at the back of the compartment. Her hands were trembling. She knows things are going too far. I'm sorry, Sarah said. Her voice was soft but clear. Daniel turned around. Is there a problem? He asked. Sarah swallowed hard. She's really injured, Sarah said. We should call for medical assistance. A moment of silence fell. Daniel looked at Sarah. His gaze turned cold. You're not in a position to make decisions, he said. Go back to where you are. Sarah stood still for another second. Then she stepped back. Ariana watched. Something inside her shattered ever so slightly. It's not that Sarah doesn't want to help. It's because she understands why. Daniel turned back towards Ariana. We're going to get her out, he said. Now, he gestured to a ground security officer, standing near the front door. Hold on to her shoulders, Daniel said. Ariana's eyes widened. No, she exclaimed. I'm not resisting. I just need. She hadn't finished her sentence. Daniel took her arm. This time it's not a light blow. Ariana felt a strong pull. The chair shook. "Stop," she cried. That sound was clearly audible in the first-class cabin. Some passengers were startled, but no one stood up. Daniel pulled Ariana out of her seat. She lost her balance. She tilted forward. My wrist was pulled sharply backward. The pain flared up intensely, as if something was being torn apart. Ariana screamed. An uncontrollable scream. Full of pain. Full of panic. "Stop, I'm not resisting," she yelled. "Stop struggling," Daniel shouted. His voice was commanding. Ariana was pressed against the front partition of the compartment. Her face touched the cold, hard surface. Her cheek stung. Daniel used his knee to block from behind, holding on tight. "Please, sir," Ariana gasped. "I'm in pain. I can't breathe." Daniel didn't answer. He pulled out another pair of handcuffs. Click. The second thread is tightened around the other wrist. Ariana felt as if the blood in her hands had stopped flowing. "She's bleeding," Sarah shouted. Margaret returned. "That's enough," she said. "Sarah, turn around." Sarah stood there speechless. She saw it clearly. Blood dripped onto the floor, forming small dark streaks on the carpet. Ariana gasped for breath. Her vision blurred. She could hear her heart pounding loudly in her ears. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. She didn't know who to talk to. Daniel pushed Ariana back into her seat. But with her hands locked behind her back, she couldn't sit up straight. She slipped. Her shoulder hit the railing hard. A sharp shooting pain shot straight up my neck. Ariana burst into tears. It can no longer be kept. Hot tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with sweat and blood. "Please," she sobbed. "Please." Daniel stood up straight. He breathed heavily, as if he had just finished an unpleasant task. "You brought this upon yourself," he said. "Now be quiet." Margaret turned her back. She gestured to another flight attendant to prepare the drinks. As if everything was over. The first-class cabin was enveloped in a different kind of silence. It's no longer about waiting. It's about being stunned. A female passenger covered her mouth with her hand. Then she lowered it again. A man bowed his head, looking at his phone, pretending to be busy. No one spoke up. Ariana sat there, handcuffed, bleeding, and they were abandoned. A few more minutes passed. Ariana didn't know how long she had been crying. She only knew she was getting colder. It started in the chest and spread to the arms and legs. She trembled uncontrollably. "Water," she whispered. "Please give me some water." Margaret didn't come back. "Water is for passengers only," she said, her voice even. Ariana laughed through her tears. A short, hoarse laugh. Almost a broken laugh. Just then, the lights in the cabin flickered slightly. The auxiliary engine noise level has been lowered. Another sound came from outside the window. The whistle. The sound of brakes screeching. Daniel turned sharply towards the front door. "What's going on?" he said into the walkie-talkie. The voice that responded from the other end didn't sound the same as before. "Someone is requesting access to the aircraft," the voice said. "And you should know." Daniel frowned. "Know what?" A very brief silence. "That person is not a passenger." Ariana couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but she saw the change in Daniel's expression. A slowdown. A new wrinkle appears between the eyebrows. Margaret returned. "Daniel," she asked. "What's wrong?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ariana. Then he looked out the window. The red and green lights reflected off the aircraft's fuselage. For the first time since it all began, he felt a very strange sensation. Not power, not control, but it's anxiety. Ariana closed her eyes. She didn't know what was coming, but deep down she felt she wasn't completely abandoned. Somewhere someone is getting very close. One person will not remain silent. After the car horn blared outside the window, the first-class cabin fell silent again. A silence different from before. No more indifference. No more coldness. Rather, it is the silence of premonition. Ariana Cole leaned back in her chair, her head tilted to one side. Her wrist ached so much she could barely feel it. The pain had surpassed the threshold of tolerance. It became something more vague, as if her body was retreating. She blinked slowly. Each time she opened her eyes, it was a struggle. Thoughts began to wander aimlessly in Ariana's head. It's no longer a specific fear. It's no longer a question of why. But these are fragments of very real memories. One early morning when she was a child, her father stood in front of the mirror, tying his tie. He bent down and asked, "Do you remember what your father told you?" Ariana nodded. "Don't cause trouble." Marcus Cole smiled. Not a smile of joy, but the smile of someone who understood the world very well. "No," he corrected. "Don't let them say you're a problem." Ariana remembers that quote clearly, because it stayed with her throughout her childhood and adolescence. Now, in this chilly first-class cabin, Ariana wonders, am I becoming a problem in their eyes? A dangerous thought, and very familiar. She hated herself for thinking that way, but she couldn't stop herself. Daniel Brooks stood near the front door. He said nothing. He just looked out the window. The red and green lights continued to reflect off the aircraft's fuselage. It moved slowly. He felt something slipping from his grasp. It wasn't clear what it was, but it was enough to make him uneasy. He turned to look at Ariana. She no longer resisted. No screaming. No begging. That didn't make him feel any better. Quite the opposite. A person who remains silent for too long often loses the strength to resist. Sarah stood at the back of the compartment. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had witnessed many tense situations, but never like this. She looked at Ariana, a girl about the same age as her cousin, handcuffed, bleeding, and they were treated like objects that needed to be disposed of. Sarah bit her lip. What is holding me back, she wondered. Is it work? Is it fear? Or is it a habit of silence? Margaret Hill stood near the galley. She adjusted her hair. She took a deep breath. She told herself she had done the right thing, that she was just upholding standards, that things had gone too far to turn back. But deep down, a small voice began to speak. What if she's right? What if I'm wrong? Margaret dismissed the thought. She wouldn't allow herself to doubt. Not now. Ariana closed her eyes. A strong wave of dizziness came over her. She felt like she was floating. The surrounding space becomes distant. The sound is distorted. Stay calm, she told herself. Just stay composed. But her body wouldn't obey. She trembled. Gently, then more intensely. Sarah was the first to realize it. She's not okay, Sarah said loudly. She's shaking. Daniel turned around. She's faking it, Margaret said immediately. Don't be fooled. Sarah looked at Margaret. Her eyes no longer held fear. No, Sarah said. She's in shock. Daniel walked closer to Ariana. Can you hear me? He asked. Ariana opened her eyes. She looked at him. Her eyes were dull, but there was something very clear in them. I'm tired, she whispered. Just 2 words. But Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. This is no longer a security situation. This is a person breaking down. Call for medical assistance, Sarah said. This time, her voice didn't tremble. Margaret returned. It's not necessary, she replied. We've waited long enough. Sarah shook her head. No, she said. We've waited too long. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. No one expected a young flight attendant to dare say something like that. Margaret glared at Sarah. But before she could say anything, the loudspeaker in the cabin blared again. Attention all crew. Remain where you are. This voice was completely different from before. There was no hesitation, no ambiguity. It is an order. Daniel froze. He turned to Margaret. This is getting out of our control, he said softly. Margaret swallowed hard. Who do you think it is? She asked. Daniel didn't answer. He looked at Ariana. Then he looked outside. An idea flashed through his mind. What did I overlook? Ariana couldn't hear the conversation clearly. She's trying to stay conscious. In her mind, the image of her father appeared clearer than ever before. Marcus Cole stood before her. He said nothing. He just stared. His gaze was serious, but warm. You don't have to carry it all, he once said. There will be times when I'll be there. Ariana swallowed. Dad, she whispered. She wasn't sure if she'd made a sound. Sarah leaned down close to Ariana. Hold on, Sarah whispered. Someone's coming. Ariana opened her eyes and looked at her. Really? She asked. Sarah nodded. Her eyes were wet. I promise. Outside, the airplane door remained closed. But at the bottom of the stairs, footsteps echoed. No rushing, no chaos. And that's for sure. It has a purpose. Daniel heard it. And for the first time during his shift, he felt afraid. It's not the danger that's frightening. It's the consequences that are. Ariana closed her eyes again. She didn't know how much longer she could endure. But she knew one thing. She didn't remain silent. She cried for help. And whatever happens next, the truth is on its way. The first-class cabin is no longer breathing. At least, that's how Ariana Cole feels. It wasn't because there was no more oxygen. It was because all sound seemed to have vanished from the room. The air conditioning was still running. The faint metallic creaking from the aircraft's fuselage continued to echo. But with Ariana, it all seemed to be pushed far away. She was somewhere else, a place where only her aching body and a clinging consciousness remained. She had lost all feeling in her hands. It wasn't numbness like from sleeping in the wrong position. Instead, it was a terrifying feeling of emptiness. It's as if someone has disconnected the brain from the hands. Ariana tried to wiggle her finger. No response. A chilling panic crept up from my stomach. No, not now. Don't do this. She bit her lip. The faint taste of blood lingered in her mouth. Daniel Brooks stood a few steps away from Ariana. He saw that change. It wasn't because he was particularly perceptive. It was because he had seen that look in her eyes before. The gazes of those people are pushing the limits of their tolerance. And that annoyed him, not out of pity, but because it put him in danger. Daniel Quay sang Margaret Hill. "We need to put an end to this," he said in a low voice. "Right now." Margaret nodded, but her hand trembled slightly. "Bring her down," she said. "Hand her over to ground security." Sarah heard it. She took a step forward. "No," Sarah said. "She can't get up." Margaret spun around. "You're overstepping your boundaries," she snapped. Sarah swallowed hard. "Maybe," she said, "but she's losing feeling in her hands. It's no longer a matter of discipline." The first-class cabin was frozen solid. No one expected this confrontation to occur between the two flight attendants. Daniel raised his hand to signal. "That's enough," he said. "We're following procedure." "Which procedure?" Sarah asked. "The procedure that made her more seriously injured." Margaret froze. She looked at Sarah. Then, she looked at Ariana. For the first time, she really saw it. It's not about looking at a problem. It's about looking at a 17-year-old girl. Pale skin, cold sweat, dark purple wrists. For a very brief moment, something within her wavered. But then, she turned away. "We don't have time for this," Margaret said. "Daniel, you do it." Daniel stepped forward. Ariana opened her eyes. She saw him approaching. She wanted to speak. She wanted to protest. But her throat was parched. Her voice was just a weak whisper. "Please, don't," she whispered. Daniel stopped. Just one beat. A question echoed in his mind that he didn't want to hear. What if she faints? He brushed it aside. He had gone too far to turn back. "Get ready," Daniel said to the security guard standing nearby. The other person stepped forward. Sarah stood in front of Ariana, shielding her. "No," Sarah said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "Get out of the way," Daniel yelled. Sarah didn't move. "She's a human being," Sarah said. "Not a piece of luggage." That statement felt like a slap in the face. Not just with Daniel, but with everyone in first class. A few passengers started to stir. He didn't get up, but he wasn't completely motionless anymore. Daniel felt the situation was spiraling out of control. He raised his hand. "Take this flight attendant outside," he said. Sarah's eyes widened. "He can't." Daniel took Sarah's arm. At that moment, Ariana screamed. A hoarse, weak scream, but full of panic. "Don't touch her." The entire cabin fell silent. Daniel was stunned, not because of the shouting, but because of the clarity in it. Ariana wasn't shouting for herself. She was shouting for someone else. Ariana was out of breath. Each breath felt like it was tearing through his chest. I'm okay," she whispered. "Don't hurt others." Daniel let go of Sarah's hand. He looked at Ariana. Then, he looked at the blood on her wrist. Then, he heard it. A new sound. Not in the cabin, but apart from airplanes. The sound of a metal door opening. Footstep. No rush, no chaos. But it's very clear. Daniel turned his head towards the front door. Margaret Hill also returned. Sarah held her breath. Those footsteps didn't sound like those of a technician. They didn't sound like those of a regular security guard. They carry the weight of power. The internal loudspeaker turned on. That's not a flight attendant's voice. That's not a pilot's voice. That was the voice of the ground manager. Captain, maintain position. Do not push back, Margaret muttered. What's going on? Daniel didn't answer. A chilling sensation ran down his spine. The front door of the plane opened. Light from outside flooded into the compartment. The silhouette of a man appeared. Tall, broad shoulders, slow gait. Nobody said anything. The person entered the compartment. Don't look around. Don't observe the other passengers. His gaze went straight to seat 1A, to Ariana. Ariana opened her eyes. Initially, everything was blurry. Then, the image gradually became clearer. A familiar figure, a presence she had known her whole life. She opened her mouth. Her voice cracked. Dad, just 1 hour. Small, almost dissolved into the air. But the man heard it. He paused. The entire first-class cabin seemed to freeze over. The man quickened his pace. He didn't run, but each step was filled with suppressed anger. Daniel stood in front of him, shielding him. Excuse me, sir. You are not allowed. The man didn't look at Daniel. Don't look at Margaret. He only looked at Ariana. And when he spoke, the entire first-class cabin fell into absolute silence. My daughter, he said. His voice was low, not loud. Who did this? No one answered. Margaret Hill felt her legs go weak. Daniel swallowed hard. Sarah burst into tears. Ariana was no longer conscious. As the man knelt down in front of seat 1A, she bowed her head towards him. Marcus Cole caught his daughter. His hand touched her wrist. Blood. Purple bruise. Cold. In that moment, all the composure on Marcus Cole's face crumbled. He lifted his head. His gaze swept across the first-class cabin. Slowly, one by one. And when he looked at Daniel Brooks, he said only one thing. He touched my child, without understanding what he was doing. No one in first class knew what was about to happen. I only know one thing. There is no turning back. No one in first class moved. It wasn't because of immediate fear. Rather, it was because no one understood what had just happened. A stranger boarded the plane. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He didn't have an employee ID badge. But when he knelt down beside seat 1A, the entire space changed. Marcus Cole said nothing more. He only kept Ariana, gently, carefully, as if just a slightly harder touch, his daughter would shatter. Ariana rested her head on her father's chest. She didn't cry out loud. She only trembled slightly. Here I am, Dad, Marcus said softly. His voice was low but steady. That statement doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be harsh. But it made Sarah burst into tears, and that made Daniel Brooks feel a chill run down his spine. Daniel straightened up. His professional instincts prompted him to react. Sir, Daniel said, you are interfering in a federal security situation. Marcus lifted his head. He looked at Daniel. No outbursts of anger, no shouting, just one glance, long enough. Who are you? Marcus asked. Daniel swallowed hard. Air Marshal Daniel Brooks, he replied. And you are not permitted, Daniel Brooks, Marcus repeated. His voice was even. It was as if he were trying to remember a name. Marcus Quay saying Margaret Hill. Are you in charge of this compartment? He asked. Margaret nodded. Her chin trembled slightly. Yes. I am the chief flight attendant. Marcus looked down at Ariana's wrist. The handcuff marks were deep. The skin was bruised purple. The blood had partially dried. Did you allow this to happen? He asked. Margaret opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was used to being in control, to giving orders. But I've never been asked that question before. Dad, Ariana whispered. I'm okay. Marcus gently squeezed his daughter's shoulder. No, he said. You don't need to be strong here. He turned to Daniel. Unclip my son, Marcus said. No request, no negotiation. An order. Daniel shook his head reflexively. I cannot, Marcus interrupted. Right now. Daniel felt his heart pounding. He has faced powerful people before. Politicians, businessmen. But the man standing before him now was unlike any of them. No threats, no bribery. Only absolute certainty exists. You don't understand, Daniel said. She's under suspicion. She's just a child, Marcus replied. And you made her bleed. The first-class cabin fell silent. Some passengers bowed their heads. A man in seat 1F coughed softly, then fell silent. Sarah stepped forward. Sir, she said to Marcus, I saw everything. Marcus turned to look at her. His gaze softened. Thank you, he said. You tried your best. Sarah nodded. Tears streamed down her face. Margaret watched the scene, and for the first time in her life, she felt she was on the wrong side. Daniel looked around. Nobody was on his side. It's not because they're defending Ariana. It's because they sensed something bigger. One wheel had begun to turn, and it was no longer in his hands. Remove the handcuffs, Marcus repeated. Daniel hesitated. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then he took out the key. A metallic sound rang out. Click. Ariana moaned softly. Blood began to pool in her arm. A sharp pain spread throughout her arm. She gritted her teeth. Marcus held her tightly. Dad's here, he whispered. Dad's holding you. Click. The second handcuff fell off. Ariana burst into tears. It wasn't because of the pain. It was because she was finally being released. Daniel took a step back. He felt the ceiling was lowering. Margaret Hill stood frozen in place. Marcus gently helped Ariana sit up straight. He took his coat and wrapped it around his daughter's shoulders. Then he stood up. Marcus Cole turned toward the front door. No one is leaving this plane, he said. His voice echoed clearly in the cabin. Daniel was stunned. He has no authority, Marcus returned. Authority, he asked. His voice lowered. He looked directly at Daniel. Do you know whose plane you're on? Daniel frowned. Margaret swallowed hard. A terrifying thought flashed through her mind. Marcus pulled out his phone. Don't call. Don't dial the number. Open only one app. Tower, he said. Keep the plane still. Don't push back. A voice responded immediately. Roger, Mr. Cole. First class is freezing cold. Daniel turned sharply towards Margaret. Who is he? He whispered. Margaret did not answer. She already knew. Marcus turned back to face everyone. Allow me to introduce you, he said. His voice was eerily calm. My name is Marcus Cole. A moment of silence. Chairman of the board of Atlantic Crown Airlines. No one is breathing. Daniel felt his stomach clench. Margaret Hill had to hold onto the edge of the chair to stay upright. Marcus took a step towards Daniel. He assaulted my daughter, he said. On my plane. He turned to Margaret. She allowed it to happen, he continued. Then he looked around the first-class cabin, and all of them remained silent. No accusations. No shouting. It's just a fact that's been laid bare. A heavy burden. Marcus bent down beside Ariana. Are you all right? He asked. Ariana nodded very slightly. It hurts, she whispered, but I'm okay. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Then open it. No, he said. You're not well, and this isn't over yet. He turned toward the door. Call the Port Authority, Marcus said, and the medical services. His tone left no room for objection. Daniel Brooks stood still. For the first time in his career, he didn't know what to do next. And he understood one thing very clearly. From this moment on, every action taken before will have a price to pay. No one disembarked from the plane. The door was still open, but no one came down. It wasn't because they were blocked. It was because no one dared. First class now resembles a makeshift courtroom. There's no judge's podium. There's no jury. Only the truth, and those who are forced to confront it. Marcus Cole stood in the middle of the walkway. He doesn't occupy space with his body. He occupies space with his presence. Ariana sat behind him, wrapped in his coat. Her hands trembled slightly, but they were no longer handcuffed. Sarah stood next to seat 1A as a volunteer witness. Daniel Brooks stood opposite Marcus. His shoulders were stiff. His jaw was clenched. Margaret Hill stood to one side. Her face was noticeably pale. Footsteps echoed from the staircase. 3 Port Authority officers entered. They were followed by a medical professional. What happened? An officer asked. Marcus returned. My daughter was assaulted, he said. Right here on this plane. No unnecessary emotion. No exaggeration. It was just a statement that had been prepared long in advance. The officer looked at Ariana. He looked at her wrist. The marks were bruised and purple. The cuts were still bleeding. He turned to Daniel. Was it you who handcuffed her? The officer asked. Daniel took a deep breath. During the process of addressing a security threat, he replied. Marcus interrupted. What threat? He asked. Please be specific. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't cooperating, he said. She wasn't following the flight attendant's instructions. Marcus nodded. And so, he handcuffed a child, he said, until blood flowed. Margaret Hill stepped forward. Officer, she said quickly, we're just following procedure. Marcus turned to look at her. What process allows for the deprivation of human dignity? He asked. Margaret froze. She was accustomed to using the word process to mask all her decisions. But this time, it didn't work. Medical personnel approached Ariana. Can you move your hands? She asked gently. Ariana shook her head. I don't feel it clearly, she said. Her voice was tired. The medical staff looked at Marcus. We need to take her for a checkup right away, she said. Marcus nodded. Go ahead, he said, and write everything down. Daniel watched the scene. A heavy feeling welled up inside him. He used to stand in closed meeting rooms, internal briefings, but never, in the eyes of a father. You have no right to keep the plane, Daniel said. His voice was lower than before. Marcus returned. You're right, he said. I didn't keep it. He looked at the officer. I'm asking you to keep this, Marcus said, until the initial investigation is complete. The officer nodded. We will do it. Daniel was stunned. He's overstepping his authority, Daniel said. Marcus walked closer. They were now only a few steps apart. He overstepped his authority by touching my child, Marcus said. The rest is the consequence. No one in first class was breathing heavily. Sarah was called to testify. She trembled, but her voice didn't crack. I saw the ticket was valid, Sarah said. She wasn't causing any trouble. She wasn't threatening anyone. To whom did you say that? The officer asked. With the chief flight attendant, Sarah replied. And with Air Marshal. Margaret bowed her head. Daniel didn't look at Sarah. A passenger in seat 1F stood up. I saw it too, he said. His voice faltered. I said things that weren't true, he continued. I asked them to take the girl away. Marcus turned to look at him. No anger. No blame. Thank you for telling me, Marcus said. But that doesn't erase what happened. The man bowed his head. The officer took quick notes. We'll need a complete crew list, he said. And cabin footage. Margaret was startled. The video recording, she repeated. Marcus looked at her. This plane has an internal surveillance system, he said. And I've seen it. Margaret felt her legs giving way. Daniel clenched his fists. He cannot use his ownership rights to interfere with the investigation, he said. Marcus nodded. That's right, he said. So, I won't interfere. He looked directly at the officer. I only ask for one thing, Marcus said. Everything to be done right. Not too fast. Not too slow. No concealment. The officer nodded. We understand. Ariana was carried away on a stretcher. She turned her head. Dad, she whispered. Marcus took his daughter's hand. I'm here, he said. And I'll be there. Ariana nodded. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not because of the pain, but because for the first time in hours, she didn't have to bear it all by herself. As Ariana was escorted off the plane, the entire first-class cabin watched. Nobody said anything. Some people bowed their heads. Some people turned away. But no one can pretend anymore that they didn't see. Marcus stopped. He turned toward Daniel Brooks. He'll have to submit an official report, Marcus said. And he'll have to answer. Daniel looked at him. Do you think you can ruin my career? Daniel asked. Marcus shook his head. No, he said. He did it himself. Marcus Quay sang Margaret Hill. You too, he said. You'll have to answer. Margaret opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything. Before leaving the plane, Marcus turned back to take one last look at the first-class cabin. This isn't about power, he said. This is about responsibility. He paused. And from now on, he continued, everything will be clarified. The airplane door closed. There was no applause. There was no murmuring. There was only silence. From those who had just witnessed a boundary being crossed. And understand that this is just the beginning. Mount Sinai Hospital was brightly lit all night. Ariana Cole lay in bed, her left arm immobilized. The heart monitor beeped steadily. The room was quiet, but in her head, no. The images kept repeating. The clicking sound of the handcuffs. a chilling sensation running down my wrist. Ariana opened her eyes. She looked up at the stark white ceiling. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked. He sat in the chair beside the bed. His vest was off. His tie was draped loosely over the armrest. Ariana nodded very slightly. "I'm fine," she said habitually. Marcus looked at his daughter. "You didn't have to say that," he replied. Ariana remained silent. The doctor walked in. His voice was low and slow. "We need to monitor further," he said. "There are signs of nerve compression. We have to wait." Marcus nodded. "Write it all down," he said. "In as much detail as possible." The doctor understood. He didn't ask any further questions. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, things were erupting. A short video clip appeared on social media. It was only a few dozen seconds long. Not clear, incomplete, but that's enough. It was enough to see Ariana handcuffed, enough to see the blood, enough to hear her voice trembling. In just 1 hour, it spread everywhere. At Atlantic Crown Airlines headquarters, the meeting room on the 14th floor was brightly lit. Familiar faces sat around the table. No one joked. No one laughed. "We need a statement," someone said. "Immediately." "No," Marcus replied through the screen. His voice was even but firm. "We need the truth." A moment of silence. "Marcus," another director said. "The media are asking." The stock Marcus interrupted. "No one in this room," he said, "is more important than a child who has been hurt." No one objected. At Margaret Hill's home, the television was on constantly. The airline's name scrolls across the screen. A blurry image of the first-class cabin repeats. Margaret sat motionless on the sofa. She doesn't answer the phone. She doesn't reply to text messages. In her mind, there was only one question. What did I overlook, and why? Daniel Brooks sat in his small office. A report lay before him. He reread each line, each word. The subject is uncooperative. Necessary measures. Ensure security. Familiar words. Words that once defended him. But now, they are empty. The phone vibrates. A message from a superior. "We need to talk." Daniel closed his eyes. Sarah sat in her small apartment. Her laptop was open. Hundreds of notifications popped up. Text messages, emails, words of encouragement, and even criticism. She placed her hands on the keyboard with trembling hands. "She did the right thing," one message read. Sarah burst into tears. "Not because of pride, but because I feel relieved." The next morning, Marcus Cole walked out in front of the hospital. No podium, no banners. It's just him. And a microphone. "I'm not here as CEO," Marcus said. "I'm here as a father." He paused. "My daughter was hurt," he continued. "And that cannot be covered up." The cameras were pointed at him. "We will cooperate fully," Marcus said. "No exceptions. No gray areas." A reporter asked, "Are you worried this will affect the airline?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "If a system only works by concealing mistakes," he said, "then that system needs to be changed." In her hospital room, Ariana watched the interview on her phone. She turned it off. "Dad doesn't need to do that," she said. Marcus returned. "I need it," he replied. "And it's not your fault." Ariana bit her lip. "I'm just tired," she said. Marcus held his daughter's hand. "Then rest," he said. "Leave the rest to me." In the afternoon, the Port Authority announced the opening of a formal investigation. The name Daniel Brooks appeared in the press release. So did Margaret Hill. No conclusions drawn, just an investigation. But it was enough to change everything. At Atlantic Crown Airlines, an internal email was sent out. Effective immediately, all procedures related to passenger handling will be reviewed. Marcus did not sign, but everyone knows. Night falls. Marcus returned to the hospital room. Ariana is asleep. He stood and looked at his daughter for a long time. Not with the gaze of a CEO, but with the gaze of a father who has just realized he arrived too late. He whispered very softly, "I'm sorry, Dad." Outside the city was still noisy. But one thing has changed. Not because of a speech, not because of a video, but silence is no longer acceptable. Marcus left the hospital close to midnight. He paused. He looked at his phone. A message from the lawyer appeared. "We need to decide on the next course of action." Marcus typed a short line. "Proceed." He locked the screen. "This war has only just begun." The Port Authority's interrogation room was unremarkable. White walls, metal table, two chairs facing each other. But for Daniel Brooks, it was a room that made the atmosphere heavier than any airplane cabin. He sat up straight, his hands resting on the table. No handcuffs, no escort. But he had never felt so naked. "Do you understand why you're here?" the investigator asked. Daniel nodded. "Because of a security situation," he replied habitually. The investigator looked at him. "No," he said, "because a child was injured." Daniel swallowed hard. In the room across the hallway, Margaret Hill sat alone. She stared at her hands, the fingers that had once held a tray of drinks, signed documents, and given orders. Now, they trembled very slightly. A female investigator walked in. "We'll begin," she said. Margaret nodded. Her voice was hoarse. Sarah Jenkins sat waiting in the waiting room. She hadn't been summoned. She had come voluntarily. The laptop was on my lap. The email from the law firm was still unopened. She wasn't sure how much she would say, but she knew she couldn't remain silent any longer. At the hospital, Ariana Cole woke up in the early morning. The faint sunlight shone through the curtains. She moved her fingers very slowly. "I have a feeling, but it's weak. A dull ache runs down my wrist." She breathed a sigh of relief. "Good morning," Marcus said. He was there. "Like every night." "Dad," Ariana said. "Do I have to testify?" Marcus was silent for a second. "If you don't want to," he said, "nobody's forcing you." Ariana looked at the ceiling. Then she turned to her father. "I want to," she said, "but I'm scared." Marcus held his daughter's hand. "I'm afraid of weakening my child," he said. "Silence is the only way to do that." In the afternoon, the preliminary hearing began. No live television broadcast. No audience. These are just the people involved. And these are the initial statements. Daniel Brooks was called in. He sat down. He took a deep breath. "Please recount the events," the investigator said. Daniel began. His voice was even, precise. He talked about process, about doubt, about split-second decisions. He didn't mention blood. He didn't mention crying. Until the investigator asked, "Did you see that the girl's wrist was bleeding?" Daniel remained silent. 1 second. 2 seconds. "Yes," he said. "So why don't you loosen the handcuffs?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Because I think she's faking it," he said. His voice trailed off. That sentence hung, suspended in the air. Next, it was Margaret Hill's turn. She sat up straight as if she were in an internal review meeting. "Have you checked the passengers' tickets?" the investigator asked. Margaret took a deep breath. "No," she said. "Not thorough enough." Why? Margaret remained silent. "Because she doesn't fit the image of a first-class actress," she said, her voice trembling. No one in the room moved. She bowed her head. "I was wrong," Margaret said. "I let my prejudices guide me." Sarah Jenkins was invited in. She stood. She didn't sit. "I saw the valid ticket," Sarah said. "I said that." "Why didn't you intervene more forcefully?" the investigator asked. Sarah swallowed. "Because I'm afraid," she replied. "Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of being left out." Then she lifted her head. "But what I fear most is being a bystander." At the hospital, Ariana watched the news in silent mode. An image of the Port Authority building appears. The words, "Investigation ongoing," are displayed below. "You don't need to watch," Marcus said. Ariana shook her head. "I need it," she replied. "Otherwise, this is just for me." That evening, Marcus met with his lawyer. "We have several options," the lawyer said. "A settlement, a compromise, avoiding a prolonged conflict." Marcus looked out the window. "My daughter may not make a full recovery," he said. "You call that a choice?" The lawyer remained silent. "Continue," Marcus said. "Don't withdraw." In Margaret Hill's apartment, she sat in the darkness. A letter from the union lay on the table, temporarily suspended. No layoffs. Not yet. But it was enough for her to understand. Her 20-year career was on the brink of collapse. Margaret recalled the moment Ariana looked up at her. No resentment. Just hurt. She burst into tears. Daniel Brooks was driving at night. The radio reported on the incident. They didn't name him. Not yet. But he knew. It was only a matter of time. He recalled Marcus Cole's gaze. Not threatening. Not hostile. It's simply uncompromising. Daniel turned off the radio. The next morning, Ariana sat up in bed. She tried holding the spoon. Fall. She was breathing heavily. Tears welled up in her eyes. Marcus walked over. "That's all right," he said. "We have time." Ariana shook her head. "I hate that they can forget," she said. "But I can't." Marcus looked at his daughter. "They will not forget," he said, "because we will not let them forget." At noon, the Port Authority issued an announcement. The formal investigation was upgraded to a criminal case. The name Daniel Brooks appeared. Margaret Hill is the same. No conclusion. Not yet. But things have crossed the line and turned back. Marcus stood in the hospital hallway, looking through the glass door. "Ariana is sleeping." The lawyer approached. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we go any further, nobody will be safe." Marcus nodded. "I know," he said. "But if we stop, nobody will really be safe." He turned away. "Keep going," Marcus said. "See it through to the end." Courtroom number 4 of the Eastern District of New York is packed. It's not because this is the first case of abuse of power. Rather, it's a case that no one can pretend not to know about. The press lined both sides. Cameras silently recorded the scene. No noise, no chaos. There was only one clear feeling: every word spoken in this room would leave a trace. Ariana Cole walked in with her father. She was wearing a light gray long coat. Her left arm was still in a splint. Walked slowly, but straight. It wasn't the gait of a weak victim. Rather, it was the gait of someone who had decided not to bow their head. Marcus walked beside his daughter, not holding hands, but always perfectly in sync behind her, like a silent wall. Daniel Brooks sat at the defendant's table. No handcuffs, no prison uniform. But his face was completely different from the man who had stood in the middle of the first-class cabin that day. Tired, stiff. He watched Ariana walk in. Their eyes met. Just 1 second. Then Daniel turned away. Margaret Hill sat behind her lawyer. She changed her hairstyle. Her clothes were more modest, but it couldn't hide the slight tremor in her hands. Sarah Jenkins was sitting in the back seat. She wasn't wearing a uniform, just a simple dress. She requested unpaid leave. Voluntarily, the judge walked in. Everyone stood up. "Please have a seat." The room fell silent. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "this is not a complicated case." A few very faint whispers. "This is a series of decisions," he continued, "made by those in power, and a child is paying the price." The large screen turned on. The cabin video was played. No cropping, no blurring. The click of the handcuffs echoed in the courtroom. Clear, stiff, a suppressed groan of pain. Several people in the room bowed their heads. Margaret Hill closed her eyes. Daniel Brooks clenched his fists. When the video ended, the room fell silent. No one applauded. No one whispered. The judge spoke up. "Call the first witness." Sarah Jenkins stepped up to the stage. She took a deep breath. "I saw the valid ticket," Sarah said. "I said that." "Were you threatened into speaking out?" the prosecutor asked. Sarah was silent for a second. "Yes," she replied. "Not directly, but very clearly." The defense lawyer stood up. "Do you understand that the chief flight attendant has the authority?" "Yes," Sarah interrupted. "But there's no right to ignore someone getting hurt." A few heavy breaths echoed in the room. Next, it was Margaret Hill's turn. She walked up slowly. "Do you believe you did the right thing at that time?" the prosecutor asked. Margaret swallowed. "Back then, yes," she replied. "Now, no." "Why?" "Because I saw an image," Margaret said. "And I believed it more than it was true." A heavy silence followed. Daniel Brooks was called up. He stood up. "Do you believe Ariana Cole is a threat?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "No," he said. "Not really." A murmur spread throughout the room. "So why did you handcuff her?" Daniel looked down. "Because I'm used to not being questioned," he said. "And because I think I'm right?" That statement was like a precise surgical incision. The defense attorney tried to turn the situation around. "He acted under high pressure. The pressure doesn't allow for cruelty," the prosecutor replied. "It's Ariana's turn." She stepped forward. The room fell silent. "I don't want to be here to make accusations," Ariana said. Her voice was low but clear. "I just wanted to share how I felt." She stopped. "I'm not afraid of being handcuffed," she said. "I'm afraid of the feeling that no one will treat me like a human being." Marcus bowed his head. Sarah burst into tears. I thought if I stayed quiet, Ariana continued, things would be better. But they weren't. She looked directly at Daniel. It's not because of him, she said. It's because the system allows it. A profound silence prevailed. The judge tapped the gavel lightly. That's enough, he said. He looked around the room. The court has heard enough. Lunch break. Outside reporters swarmed the area. Marcus did not answer the question. He stood next to his daughter. Are you all right? He asked. Ariana nodded. I'm trembling, she said. But I don't regret it. Marcus smiled very slightly. The judge returned in the afternoon. This trial isn't just about the law, he said. It's about standards. He looked at Daniel. He has crossed the line. He looked at Margaret. She has shirked her responsibilities. The verdict will be announced in the next session, the judge said. But the court has issued an immediate order the suspension of all parties involved. Margaret sank into her chair. Daniel closed his eyes. Ariana leaves the courtroom. Step into the light. Outside, a reporter shouted, Do you think justice has been served? Ariana paused. She turned around. Not yet, she said. But today, it started. Marcus placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. They both walked through a forest of cameras. Don't run. Don't hide. The light shines directly, and none of them turned away. Courtroom number 4 was packed again. The initial curiosity is gone. The whispering is over. All that remains is to wait. Ariana Cole sat in the front row next to her father. Her left hand rested on her thigh. The splint had been removed, but her fingers still moved slowly. She looked down at her hands. Then she looked up. The court will deliver its verdict today. Daniel Brooks stood up when his name was called. The toughness is gone. The arrogance is gone. He was just a man who had come to understand that every word he had once used to defend himself was now turning against him. Margaret Hill was sitting a few rows away. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared straight ahead. It's as if you don't turn back, the past will never reach you. The judge walked in. Everyone in the room stood up. Please have a seat. His voice was low. It lacked personal emotion. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge said the court has reached this conclusion. No one was breathing heavily. Daniel Brooks, he read, confirmed to have used excessive force violating the civil rights of a minor. Daniel closed his eyes. The court sentenced him to 18 months of probation, 3 years of supervised release, and the removal of his federal duties. A sigh echoed from somewhere in the room, neither happy nor disappointed. It's just heavy. Margaret Hill, the judge continued, was found to have gravely breached her professional duties, directly contributing to the physical and mental harm inflicted on the passenger. Margaret ran up. The court ruled permanently terminates the flight attendant's right to practice and disqualifies them from civil liability in the upcoming lawsuit. Margaret bowed her head. A single tear fell to the floor. No one looked at her. The judge paused. But the court also made it clear, he continued. No sentence can restore what the girl has lost. He looked toward Ariana. Miss Cole, he said. Do you have anything to say? Ariana stood up. The room fell silent. I'm not standing here to celebrate, Ariana said. Her voice was calm. I'm not standing here to forgive either. A few people looked up. I just want to say, she continued, justice doesn't make me feel any better. It only makes me less alone. Marcus gently closed his eyes. After the trial, the crowd broke apart. Reporters pushed their way to the front. Are you satisfied with the verdict? Someone asked Marcus. Marcus shook his head. Satisfied isn't the right word, he said. This isn't a victory. He looked at his daughter. This is a necessary stop. It's sunny outside. Ariana walked slowly down the steps of the courthouse. Another reporter asked, Do you feel you've been compensated? Ariana pondered. No, she said. But I feel seen. She turned away. Life did not return to normal in the days that followed. It wasn't as fast as people thought. Ariana has started physiotherapy. Small movements. Repeat. She bit her lip every time her hands trembled. I hate this feeling, she told her father. It's like my body is betraying me. Marcus sat beside him. No, he said. Your body is relearning how to trust. Daniel Brooks moved his belongings out of his small house. The name tag has been removed. The badge is in the box. He looked at it for a long time, not with resentment, but with a question that has no answer. What kind of person have I become? Margaret Hill left the apartment. Quiet. No reporters. It's just an old suitcase. She stopped at the door. Looking back, then leave. No one knows what she will do next. Atlantic Crown Airlines has announced a series of changes. New training program. New passenger handling procedures. Marcus signed the document. But he knew paperwork couldn't heal people. One evening, Marcus and Ariana were sitting on the balcony. The city was brightly lit. "Dad," Ariana said, "if this hadn't happened, who would I be?" Marcus remained silent. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "you won't have to ask that question." Ariana nodded. "I don't want to be remembered only for this," she said. Marcus Quay sang. "You won't," he said. "You'll be remembered for how you move forward." Ariana held the glass of water with her left hand. "Run, but don't fall." She smiled. Very small. Somewhere a new video was shared. Not a scene of handcuffs. Instead, Ariana walked out of the physiotherapy room. Slowly, but with her back straight. The following text appeared. "Justice is not the end. It's the beginning." Marcus looked at his phone. Then he turned off the screen. "Tomorrow," he said. "What do you want to do?" Ariana pondered. "I want to get on the plane," she said. Marcus froze. "Are you sure?" Ariana nodded. "Not to prove anything," she said. "Just to prevent fear from deciding for my child." Marcus took a deep breath. Then he said, "We will fly." That night Ariana lay in bed. She opened her hand, then closed it. Not perfect, but it's still there. She closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she slept without dreaming of the clicking sound. If you followed this story this far, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. This isn't to endorse a video. It's to remind each other that stories like this shouldn't be forgotten. The airport was quieter that morning than Ariana Cole had expected. No sirens, no shouting, no flashing lights. The only sounds were the rolling wheels of suitcases on the stone floor and the monotonous announcements from the loudspeaker. Ariana stood in front of the security gate, her left hand gripping the strap of her backpack. Still, a little nervous, but I didn't back down. Marcus Cole stood next to his daughter. He said nothing. He didn't urge me. He didn't offer excessive reassurance. He let his son choose his own rhythm. "You can stop if you want," Marcus said. Ariana shook her head. "No," she replied. "If you don't go today, it will always get ahead of you." Marcus nodded. They continued walking. As Ariana placed her backpack on the security conveyor belt, a TSA employee looked up. His gaze swept over her arm splint, over her face. Then he smiled very slightly. "Have a good flight," he said. Just one simple sentence. But Ariana felt a lump in her throat. She walked through the scanner. No sirens. No one stopped them. Just an ordinary person passing by. Ariana stepped aside. Inhale, exhale. Marcus walked over. "Are you all right?" he asked. Ariana nodded. "I'm still scared," she said. "But I'm not frozen anymore." Marcus placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "That's enough," he said. The plane that day was not Atlantic Crown Airlines. Marcus didn't want this flight to have any other meaning. They were seated in the middle row. Not first class. No special privileges. Just father and son. Ariana sat by the window. She looked at the airplane wing. Tiny scratches. The marks of thousands of journeys. She placed her left hand on the armrest. No handcuffs. No strangulation. It's just a touch. As the plane began to taxi, Ariana closed her eyes. A fleeting memory came flooding back. A clicking sound, a cold gaze, the feeling of being held captive. She opened her eyes. Marcus was still there. No need to say anything. Just stay there. The plane took off. The force pushed Ariana's back against the chair. She breathed heavily. Then, he smiled. Not big, but real. A few weeks later, Ariana returned to school. Not the same as before, but not weaker either. She learned to type at a slower pace. She learned to accept new limitations. There were days when she was angry. There were days when she was so tired she didn't want to get out of bed. And there were also days when she forgot her hand had ever been injured. Marcus Cole is back at work, but he changed his appearance. No more avoiding questions. No more silence in the face of injustice. He didn't turn his daughter into an icon. He kept repeating only one thing. Don't ask why it happened. Ask why we accepted it in the first place. Atlantic Crown Airlines has changed. Not just on paper. Training sessions are no longer about slideshows. They're about real stories. Ariana Grande is not named. No shocking details. It's just one question asked of every new employee. If it were your child, what would you do differently? Margaret Hill lives in a different city. She did a job that nobody recognized. No airplanes, no uniforms. There were nights when she would wake up remembering Ariana's eyes. She had no more excuses. Just learn to live with that memory. Daniel Brooks is no longer in the system. He underwent compulsory therapy, not to regain power, but to understand why I once thought power allowed me to not need to listen. No one writes about him anymore. But there are some lessons that don't need to be published in the newspaper. Sarah Jenkins has moved on to become a new flight attendant trainer. She didn't tell the story to scare people. She told the story to remind them. Silence is also an option, but it always has consequences. One afternoon, Ariana was sitting in a small cafe. She opened her laptop. Her left hand rested on the table. Run slightly, but steadily. She began to write. Not a lawsuit, not a declaration. It's an essay. It's about the feeling of being seen through. It's about learning to reclaim your own space. In the last line she wrote, "Justice doesn't bring back the past, but it gives me the right to move on." Marcus read that article. He didn't make any corrections. He didn't offer any suggestions. Just send one message back. "I'm proud of you, son." Ariana Cole's story isn't just about discrimination. It's about very real moments where people are faced with a choice between safety and dignity. The first lesson is, silence isn't always peace. Many in the story chose silence out of fear of trouble. Fear of losing their position. Fear of being implicated. But that very silence hurt a child. In everyday life, sometimes just a well-timed word, a glance that doesn't turn away, can change the outcome for a person. The second lesson is, power does not exempt one from responsibility. Procedures, titles, or uniforms do not allow anyone to disregard the suffering of others. When we become accustomed to power and forget to listen, that is when we lose our humanity. And the most profound lesson is healing isn't about forgetting, but about learning to live on without letting fear control you. Ariana didn't win through revenge, but by getting back on the plane, by continuing to write her life story in a slower but more steadfast way. This story reminds us that anyone can be Ariana, and anyone can be a bystander or someone who stands up for themselves. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. Your presence is what keeps stories like this going to be told. If you see yourself in this, if you believe that kindness and fairness still matter, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not just to support us, but so that flights and lives become places where no one is considered invisible.